The phenomenology of LOOSH, a comprehensive analysis of energetic extraction narratives in metaphysical and conspiratorial systems. Executive summary. The concept of LOOSH, a term originally coined by consciousness researcher Robert Monroe to describe a spectrum of emotional energy generated by organic life, has evolved from an obscure metaphysical neologism into a foundational pillar of modern alternative soteriology and digital conspiracy culture. What began as a complex allegory for the evolution of human consciousness in Monroe's Far Journeys, 1985, has been radically recontextualized through the lenses of Gurdjieffian cosmology, Gnostic theology, and contemporary political paranoia. This report provides an exhaustive, multidisciplinary examination of the LOOSH phenomenon. It traces the etymological and conceptual lineage of the term, deconstructs the specific mechanics of energy farming as proposed by various theorists, and analyzes the sociological implications of the prison planet narrative. By synthesizing data from primary esoteric texts, near-death experience (NDE) reports, and the sprawling folklore of the Internet age, including the canon-adrenochrome convergence, this document elucidates how the LOOSH hypothesis serves as a modern theodicy, a dark rationalization for the persistence of human suffering. Part I, the Monrovian Genesis and the Garden Road. To understand the current semantic dominance of LOOSH in esoteric circles, one must first engage in a granular analysis of its origin within the experimental framework of the Monroe Institute. Robert Monroe, a radio executive whose spontaneous out-of-body experiences (OBS) led to a lifetime of disciplined consciousness research, introduced the term in his second major work, Far Journeys. Unlike traditional mystics who used religious lexicon, Monroe employed a secular, almost bureaucratic terminology to map the non-physical realms. LOOSH emerged from this taxonomical effort not as a demonological assertion, but as a rote, a packet of compressed, non-verbal information received during an altered state of consciousness. 1.1 The architecture of the revelation. In the narrative structure of Far Journeys, Monroe describes an encounter with a highly advanced non-physical entity referred to as an intelligent species. This interaction was not characterized by the worshipful tone of religious epiphany, but by the inquisitive, skeptical nature of an explorer encountering a superior intelligence. The inspect provided Monroe with a rote to explain the underlying purpose of the Earth's biological system. The rote is framed as a cosmogonic history of a creator entity named Someone. This entity, existing in a realm labeled Somewhere, faced a resource scarcity. The specific resource required was LOOSH. In the initial definitions provided by the rote, LOOSH is described with deliberate ambiguity, equated analogously to electricity, oil, blood, or food, a vital, functional energy source necessary for the survival or pleasure of entities in Somewhere. The narrative of the rote proceeds through a series of experimental phases, which Monroe categorized as crops. This agricultural metaphor is crucial, as it establishes the fundamental power dynamic that defines all subsequent LOOSH theories. The relationship between humanity and the divine is not parent-child, but farmer-crop. 1.2 The evolutionary crops, a taxonomy of harvesting. The rote details a trial-and-error process of biological engineering conducted by someone to maximize LOOSH yields. This sequence is often cited by modern theorists as evidence of a calculated, predatory design inherent in the natural world. The first and second crops. The initial attempt's first crop involved stationary, unicellular life forms. These simple organisms harmonized with the carbon-oxygen cycle but produced LOOSH only in negligible, microscopic quantities. Someone perceived this yield as insufficient for the needs of Somewhere. The second crop involved the introduction of simple vegetation. While this scaled up the biomass, the energetic output remained unrefined and low voltage. The third crop, the introduction of mobility and predation. The critical inflection point in the rote, and the source of the LOOSH suffering hypothesis, occurs with the third crop. Someone introduced mobility to the biological units, creating animals, or mobiles. However, mobility alone did not generate sufficient LOOSH. The rote describes someone observing the mobiles and inadvertently discovering a prime catalyst for energy production, conflict. When the mobiles fought over resources, or when one mobile consumed another, The moment of death and the intense struggle for survival released a spike of high-grade LOOSH. To capitalize on this, someone restructured the entire ecosystem around the predator-prey dynamic. This is a profound theological assertion that predation, violence, and the food chain are not accidents of evolution or results of a fall, but deliberate engineering features designed to maximize energetic output. The law of the jungle is thus reframed as an industrial optimization protocol. The fourth crop, the human experiment. Despite the success of the third crop, the quality of LOOSH was still variable. Someone desired a more distilled variety. This led to the creation of the fourth crop, humanity. To achieve this, someone infused the biological vessels with a spark of its own consciousness. This injection of divine awareness expanded the emotional range of the units, allowing for the generation of highly complex frequencies of LOOSH. The rote lists specific emotional states that generate the highest yields. Loneliness and longing. The isolation of the individuated consciousness creates a yearning frequency that is highly prized. Parental defense. The fierce, protective emotion of a parent defending its young, even at the cost of its own life, produces a uniquely pure strain of LOOSH. Grief and loss. The crushing sorrow of bereavement is described as a heavy, potent yield. Worship. The directed adoration of a deity, often someone in disguise, creates a steady, reliable stream of energy. 1.3 The harvest mechanism and the collectors. Monroe's narrative describes collectors, specialized non-physical entities dispatched from somewhere to gather the harvest. These collectors move through the Earth's astral atmosphere, siphoning the energy plumes released during wars, natural disasters, and individual traumatic events. The rote explicitly states that collectors on behalf of the others actually entered the garden of someone to take advantage of those small emanations of LOOSH overlooked or ignored by the collectors of someone. This detail introduces the concept of poachers or parasitic entities that feed on the system, distinct from the creator itself. This distinction becomes vital in late agnostic interpretations, where the poachers are identified as archons. 1.4 The LOOSH is love paradox. The most contested aspect of Monroe's revelation is the conclusion. Upon receiving this rote, Monroe fell into a deep, depressive funk, famously requiring 2 weeks to integrate the horror of realizing humanity is merely cattle. He struggled to reconcile his previous understanding of a loving universe with this cold, industrial reality. However, the InSpec entity eventually intervenes to correct Monroe's interpretation. The entity explains that the translation of the rote was colored by Monroe's human perspective. The InSpec reveals that the distilled, pure LOOSH that someone ultimately desires is not suffering, but love. The rote explains that while conflict and death produce LOOSH, they are impure or raw forms. The evolutionary goal of the garden is to teach the units to generate the super love frequency voluntarily, without the catalyst of pain. Tom Campbell, a physicist and early explorer with Monroe, has strongly advocated for this interpretation. Campbell argues that the farming analogy was a result of Monroe's own subconscious filtering. Monroe grew up in a farming community in Ohio, and that the rote was a metaphor for entropy reduction. In this view, LOOSH is simply consciousness data or spiritual growth, and the harvest is the system evolving toward a state of higher organization, love. Despite this optimistic conclusion in the primary text, the farming of suffering component of the rote detached itself from the love resolution. It mutated into an independent meme, fueling the prison planet theories that reject the idea of benevolent evolution entirely. Part 2, The Gurdjieffian Cosmology, Iskokin and the Terror of the Situation. While Monroe provided the vocabulary of LOOSH, the structural metaphysics of the human energy farm find their deepest philosophical roots in the fourth-way teachings of George Ivanovich Gurdjieff. Writing in the early 20th century, amidst the slaughter of World War I and the Russian Revolution, Gurdjieff presented a cosmology that is arguably more bleak and mechanistic than Monroe's. 2.1 The Ray of Creation and the Living Moon. Gurdjieff's cosmology, detailed in Beelzebub's Tales to his grandson, posits that the universe is a living, growing hierarchy. In this system, celestial bodies are not dead matter but evolving beings. Gurdjieff identifies the moon not as a satellite, but as a planetary embryo that has broken off from the Earth but has not yet developed its own atmosphere or independent life. To grow and evolve into a planet, the Moon requires constant nourishment. It feeds on a specific subtle energy generated by the organic life film on Earth. This establishes the reciprocal maintenance of the cosmos. The Sun feeds the Earth feeds the Moon, and humanity is merely a cog in this digestive tract. 2.2 Skokin, the sacred vibration. Gurdjieff names this lunar food as Skokin. The production of a Skokin is the primary cosmic function of humanity. It is released during biological processing, digestion, respiration, but is liberated in massive quantities during the death of the physical body. Gurdjieff presents a chilling calculus regarding a Skokin production. If humanity does not produce enough of this energy through conscious labor and intentional suffering, a specific spiritual practice of self-remembering and friction against mechanical habits, nature must secure the energy by other means. Gurdjieff explicitly attributes wars, revolutions, and pandemics to the Moon's hunger. When the quota of a Skokin drops, the planetary influences incite madness and bloodlust in the human masses. The resulting slaughter releases the necessary volume of energy to satisfy the Moon. 2.3 The Kunda buffer organ, the implanted delusion. To ensure that humanity would serve this sacrificial role without rebellion, Gurdjieff describes a prehistoric intervention by higher sacred individuals, archangels. They implanted an organ at the base of the human spine called the Kunda buffer, a portmanteau of Kundalini and buffer. The function of the Kunda buffer was to alter human perception so that reality would appear upside down. It caused humans to perceive misery as happiness, slavery as freedom, and the temporary as eternal. Although the organ was eventually removed, its energetic crystallization remains in the human psyche. This predisposition towards illusion keeps humanity asleep, functioning as mechanical energy-producing machines rather than conscious beings. 2.4 Comparative synthesis, Skokin versus LOOSH. The correspondence between Monroe's LOOSH and Gurdjieff's Skokin is structurally exact, though terminologically distinct. Asterisk source, both are generated by organic life, specifically humans. Asterisk trigger, both are released maximally during death and extreme emotional agitation. Asterisk consumer, both are consumed by higher cosmic entities, the Moon someone, for their own maintenance. Asterisk the trap, both systems suggest that human perception is engineered, Kunda buffer garden design, to prevent awareness of this process. Modern theorists synthesize these views, suggesting that LOOSH is the modern name for a Skokin, and that the Moon is the base of operations for the collectors or archons. ## Part 3, the shamanic vector, Castaneda's predator and the forum installation. The third major stream feeding the LOOSH reservoir comes from the controversial anthropological accounts of Carlos Castaneda. In his later works, particularly The Active Side of Infinity 1998, Castaneda introduces a predation model that aligns perfectly with the LOOSH hypothesis, adding a psychological dimension to the harvesting mechanism. 3.1 The Mud Shadows, the Flyers. Castaneda's mentor, the Yaqui sorcerer Don Juan Matus, reveals the existence of an inorganic species called Los Voladores, the Flyers. These entities are described as mud shadows that flit across the periphery of vision. Don Juan asserts that these entities are the topic of topics in sorcery, the ultimate secret of the human condition. We have a predator that came from the depths of the cosmos and took over the rule of our lives. Human beings are its prisoners. 3.2 The glowing coat of awareness. In the sorceric taxonomy, human beings are perceived as luminous spheres of energy. This luminosity is described as the glowing coat of awareness. Don Juan explains that the Flyers feed on this coat. Throughout the human life, the Flyers consume the luminosity, eating it down until only a thin rim remains at the level of the heels. This rim is sufficient for basic biological survival and egoic reflection, but insufficient for higher consciousness or magical feats. This explains why humans are spiritually lethargic and obsessed with trivialities. 3.3 The forum installation, the mind. Castaneda's most radical contribution to the LOOSH theory is the identification of the human mind as the foreign installation. Don Juan states, the predator's mind is baroque, contradictory, morose, filled with the fear of being discovered any minute now. He claims that the internal dialogue, the ceaseless chatter of worry, doubt, and self-reflection, is not human in origin. It is a device installed by the flyers to generate emotional flares. When the mind worries, gets angry, or feels self-pity, the glowing coat flares up, offering a burst of energy that the flyer consumes. This creates a closed loop. The flyer installs the mind creates stress, the stress generates food for the flyer, and the consumption of energy keeps the human too weak to dismantle the mind. This model provides the psychological mechanism for LOOSH harvesting. It suggests that anxiety and depression are not mental illnesses, but predatory feeding events. Part IV, the Gnostic Revival, Achons and the Demiurge. The modern prison planet theory is, at its core, a techno-Gnostic revival. It strips the ancient Gnostic texts of their specific Judeo-Christian context and refits them with the language of simulation theory and energy economics. The discovery of the Nag Hammadi library in 1945 provided the textual ammunition for this synthesis. 4.1 The Demiurge, Yul the Ba'ath. Gnostic cosmology describes a false god, the Demiurge, often named Yul the Ba'ath or Saklas, who is an ignorant and arrogant abortion of the divine Sophia, wisdom. Yul the Ba'ath creates the material universe, Kenema, as a flawed copy of the spiritual realm, Pleroma, and traps divine sparks, souls, within matter. In the LOOSH framework, Yul the Ba'ath is identified as Monroe's someone. The garden is the Kenema, a containment system designed to extract energy from the trapped sparks. The jealous God of the Old Testament, who demands burnt offerings and fear, is interpreted literally as a LOOSH-hungry entity. 4.2 The Archons as energy parasites. The Demiurge is served by Archons, rulers. Ancient texts describe them as having animalistic forms, lion-headed serpents, etc., and guarding the planetary spheres to prevent souls from ascending. Modern theorists equate the Archons with the collectors of Monroe and the flyers of Castaneda. Crucially, the Gnostic text The Hypostasis of the Archons and writings by Epiphanius describe the soul as food or dew for the Archons. They say that the soul is the food of the Archons and powers without which they cannot live, because the soul is of the dew from above and gives them strength. This dew of heaven is the ancient philological equivalent of LOOSH. 4.3 The role of Sophia and the divine spark. The Gnostic narrative adds a tragic dimension to the LOOSH farm. Humans are not merely crops. They are fallen divinity. The divine spark, pneuma, within humanity is of a higher order than the Archons. The Archons, being inorganic and soulless, envy the human capacity for creativity and emotion. They farm humans because they lack the connection to the source, the Pleroma, and must parasitize human light to survive. This establishes the LOOSH economy as a necessity for the Archons' survival, making them desperate and ruthless jailers. Part V, the modern syncretism, prison planet and the soul trap. The convergence of Monroe, Gurdjieff, Castaneda, and Gnosticism has birthed the prison planet or soul trap theory, a dominant narrative in modern conspiracy spirituality found on Reddit communities like Our Escaping Prison Planet, Our Reincarnation Truth. This theory synthesizes the metaphysical mechanics into a grim, technological picture of the afterlife. 5.1 The white light as a law. The central innovation of the modern theory is the reinterpretation of the near-death experience, NDE. Standard NDE literature celebrates the tunnel of light and the being of light as evidence of a loving afterlife. The prison planet theory argues that this is a deception, a technological law designed to recycle the soul. The argument posits, the light is artificial, it is a magneto-electric trap, a soul catcher, used to wipe the memory of the deceased. Love bombing. The overwhelming feeling of love experienced in the light is a synthetic opioid-like frequency used to sedate the soul and lower its defenses. The life reviewer's guilt trip. The life review is not educational but coercive. Archons, posing as religious figures or loved ones, use the review to generate guilt. Look how you hurt this person. They then weaponize this guilt to convince the soul that it has karmic debt and must return to Earth to make it right. 5.2 The memory wipe. Tabula rasa. The most potent argument for the prison planet theory is the memory wipe. Theorists argue that if Earth were truly a school, as the New Age claims, students would remember their lessons from previous lives. The fact that humans are born with total amnesia suggests that the system is not designed for learning, but for repetition. The memory wipe ensures that the soul remains ignorant, repeats the same emotional mistakes, and continues to generate LOOSH in perpetuity. The school is a fraud. It is a treadmill. 5.3 The mechanics of the matrix simulation. This theory often incorporates simulation theory. The physical world is viewed as a holographic projection or matrix coded by the image. LOOSH is the power source for the server. In this model, human suffering, wars, pain, anxiety acts as the electrical current that keeps the simulation running. Peace is merely a fallow period for the crop to regrow. War is the harvest. The targeted individual phenomenon is also integrated here. People who wake up to this reality gnosis report being harassed by gang stalking or synchronicities of bad luck. This is interpreted as the automated immune system of the Matrix attacking a rogue unit to force it back into a low vibrational state of fear. LOOSH production. Part 6. The biopolitical manifestation, canon, and adrenochrome. While the prison planet theory remains largely metaphysical, a parallel track has grounded the LOOSH concept in biological and political conspiracy theories. This creates a bridge between energy harvesting and blood libel. 6.1 David Icke and the reptilian hybridization. David Icke popularized the idea that the Archons have a biological interface with our reality, the reptilians. It claims that a race of interdimensional shapeshifters, the Archons in physical form, interbred with humanity to create hybrid bloodlines, the global elite, Illuminati. It explicitly uses the term LOOSH to describe the energy these beings feed on. However, he adds a ritualistic component. He asserts that the reptilians require not just ambient negative energy, but the specific frequency released during extreme trauma and death. This leads to the accusation that the elite conduct satanic ritual abuse, and child sacrifice to harvest this energy. 6.2 The adrenochrome convergence. With the rise of canon, the metaphysical concept of LOOSH was conflated with the chemical compound adrenochrome, oxidized adrenaline. In Hunter S. Thompson's Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas, adrenochrome is fictionalized as a potent psychedelic harvested from living human adrenal glands. Canon mythology adopted this fiction as fact, claiming the elite harvest it from tortured children to extend their lives. In the syncretic worldview, adrenochrome and LOOSH are linked. Adrenochrome is the physical byproduct, the drug. LOOSH is the metaphysical byproduct, the spirit food. The act of torture supposedly releases both simultaneously. The physical perpetrator consumes the adrenochrome, while the interdimensional entity possessing them, the Archon reptilian, consumes the LOOSH. This synthesis allows conspiracy theorists to view political enemies not just as corrupt, but as literal vampires feeding on the population. 6.3 Table 1, Comparative Taxonomy of Harvesting Substances. Pipe concept, pipe origin theorist, pipe nature of substance, pipe method of extraction, pipe purpose, pipe dash 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 pipe. Pipe LOOSH, pipe Robert Monroe, pipe emotional psychic energy, pipe death, fear, love, struggle, pipe food fuel for somewhere, pipe Skokin, pipe G. Agajiv, pipe cosmic vibration, pipe war, mass death. Breathing, pipe feeding the moon, pipe glowing coat, pipe Carlos Castaneda, pipe luminous awareness, pipe emotional flares, ego, self-pity, pipe food for flyers, pipe dew of heaven, pipe gnosticism, pipe soul essence, pneuma, pipe entrapment in matter, pipe strength for Archons, pipe adrenochrome, pipe canon, H. S. Thompson, pipe oxidized adrenaline, chemical, pipe torture. Extraction from glands, pipe anti-aging, hive elites, pipe part 7, soteriology of escape, starving the Archons. The ultimate utility of the LOOSH theory for its adherents is the formulation of an escape plan. Unlike religions that promise salvation through faith or works, the LOOSH prison planet hypothesis requires a technical, almost legalistic, liberation. 7.1 Emotional neutrality, the Grey Rock method. If the Archons feed on emotional extremes, both manic joy and depressive fear, The primary defense is neutrality. Borrowing from Stoicism and Eastern detachment, adherents practice starving the archons by refusing to react emotionally to worldly events. This is often described as becoming like a grey rock. By maintaining a zero-point emotional state, the individual becomes tasteless to the predators and preserves their own energy. 7.2 The sovereign refusal. The exit strategy focuses on the moment of death. The instruction is to ignore the light, do not enter the tunnel. Turn away from the white light and look for the void or the grid holes. Refuse the life review, deny the authority of any being that appears. Use the statement I do not consent. Reject any guilt or karmic debt as a deception. Claim sovereignty, assert one's identity as a free, divine spark, source consciousness that cannot be contained. Will oneself elsewhere, use the power of intent to instantly transport to the pleroma or a self-created realm, bypassing the reincarnation trap entirely. 7.3 Conclusion, the modern theodicy. The LOOSH narrative serves as a potent modern theodicy. It explains the prevalence of evil, the sensation of spiritual exhaustion, and the corrupt nature of socio-political systems in one unified theory. It validates the suffering of the individual by framing it as valuable energy coveted by interdimensional powers. While bleak, it offers a form of Gnostic empowerment, the belief that through knowledge of the farm, one can finally open the gate and walk away. The evolution of LOOSH from Monroe's neutral road with demonological conspiracy reflects a deepening distrust in the structures of reality itself. In an era of digital surveillance and algorithmic manipulation, the idea that our very emotions are data being harvested by an unseen system resonates as the ultimate mythological expression of the 21st century condition. Bibliography and source identifiers. Primary metaphysical texts, Robert Monroe, Far Journeys G. Gurdjieff, Beelzebub's Tales to his grandson Carlos Castaneda, The Active Side of Infinity Nag Hammadi Library, Hypostasis of the Archons, Apocryphon of John Modern Conspiracy and Synthesis. Davidic and Reptilians, Canon and Adrenochrome, Prison Planet, Soul Trap Reddit Forums, Tom Campbell, Interpretations.